The dojo smelled faintly of sweat, polish, and incense, that peculiar blend of effort and serenity. The echo of wooden clappers from the last class still lingered in the air as the students gathered their bags, chatting and joking. Only a few remained, including Raphael, the dojo's pride, a black belt in his late 20s with the swagger of someone who knew it. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, tying his belt tighter around his waist as he laughed with his friends. His laughter, loud and cutting, filled the wide space like a challenge. In the corner, moving silently with a mop and bucket, was Malik, the janitor. His dark skin glowed slightly under the fluorescent lights, and his movements were rhythmic, almost graceful, as if cleaning were its own kind of kata. He had been working at the dojo for 6 months, never speaking much, always nodding politely to the students and instructors. Nobody really noticed him anymore. To them, he was part of the background, a shadow sweeping up their dust. Raphael, catching sight of him, felt a mischievous spark. "Hey, Malik," he called across the room, his voice echoing. The janitor looked up, his expression unreadable. "You ever tried fighting?" The tone wasn't friendly. It was bait, the kind that always came before laughter. The other students chuckled, already sensing a show. Malik leaned on the mop handle, eyes calm and steady. "Not in a while," he said quietly. His voice carried no fear, no irritation, just quiet certainty. That only irritated Raphael more. "Come on," Raphael said, stepping closer, his grin widening. "You look strong. Let's see what you've got, just for fun." Malik's gaze moved from Raphael's proud stance to the others watching with expectant faces. He seemed to weigh something silently. The mop slid into the bucket, water rippling softly. "I fight when I have to," Malik said, turning slightly as if to return to his work. That calm refusal stung Raphael's ego like a slap. "What's the matter? Afraid to lose to someone trained?" He sneered, his voice sharp, provoking. The other students whispered among themselves, laughing quietly. The sound was thin but cruel. Malik's hands tightened for a moment on the handle, then released. He turned again, meeting Raphael's gaze directly. His eyes were deep, ancient somehow. The kind of eyes that had seen too much to bother with proving anything. But something in Raphael's tone, something in that arrogant smirk, made him finally step away from the mop. He placed it gently against the wall and walked toward the center of the mat, the soles of his worn shoes whispering against the floor. Raphael blinked, momentarily surprised that the man had accepted. The laughter in the background hushed. Malik didn't take off his uniform or shoes. He simply stood there, posture relaxed, breathing slow. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint dripping of water from the mop into the bucket. "All right then," Raphael said, stretching his shoulders. "Let's make this quick." But deep down, something in Malik's quiet presence began to unsettle him. Something in the stillness that didn't feel like submission, but like control. The room grew heavy with silence as Malik and Raphael faced each other. The students formed a loose circle around the mat, excitement flickering in their eyes. Some whispered bets, others simply waited to see humiliation, either Raphael's or the janitor's. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and sweat, and in that charged stillness even the hum of the lights seemed distant. Raphael loosened his stance, his black belt hanging neatly, the mark of years of training and tournaments. He cracked his knuckles, grinning like a predator playing with its prey. Malik, still wearing his gray work shirt and worn sneakers, didn't bother adjusting his clothes. He only exhaled softly, his hands hanging loosely by his sides, eyes focused, but not aggressive. His entire being radiated patience, not challenge. Raphael moved first, as everyone expected. He darted forward with a sharp, precise kick aimed at Malik's ribs, the kind of move that dropped amateurs fast. But Malik's body swayed aside with minimal effort, as if he'd predicted it before Raphael even moved. The kick met air. The students gasped softly. Malik didn't strike back. He simply returned to stillness, his eyes calm, almost compassionate. "Beginner's luck," Raphael muttered, his pride tightening his jaw. He struck again, faster this time, a combination of kicks and punches, each one snapping through the air with force. Malik didn't block, he flowed. Each motion he made was small, effortless, like water shifting around stone. A turn of the shoulder, a subtle sidestep, a soft touch that redirected the blow before it could land. The sound of Raphael's breathing grew louder, heavier. He was missing, over and over again. Then, with a flicker of motion too fast to catch, Malik moved. One hand intercepted Raphael's wrist, the other swept low, and in an instant, Raphael's balance vanished. The black belt hit the mat with a dull thud that echoed through the dojo. The students' whispers stopped mid-breath. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Raphael lay stunned, the air knocked out of him, eyes wide in disbelief. Malik stepped back, waiting. "Get up," he said quietly, not mocking, not angry. "You're better than that." His tone was calm, like a teacher, not an opponent. That voice, calm in the midst of dominance, unsettled Raphael more than the fall itself. Raphael sprang back up, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "You think this is over?" he hissed, rushing forward again. Malik didn't move until the last moment. Raphael's fist came flying, but Malik slipped to the side and tapped the inside of Raphael's arm with surgical precision. The nerve strike was small, almost invisible, but it made Raphael's arm go limp. Before anyone could react, Malik pivoted and swept Raphael's legs in one fluid motion. This time, he landed harder. The sound of his body hitting the floor silenced everything. Even Raphael's friends, who moments ago were laughing, now watched with wide eyes, the laughter frozen on their lips. Malik stood over him, breathing slow and even, not a single drop of sweat on his face. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply offered his hand to help Raphael up. Raphael hesitated, chest heaving, his ego collapsing under the weight of what just happened. Slowly, he took the offered hand. Malik pulled him up with effortless strength, his grip firm but gentle. "Fighting for fun," Malik said quietly, "isn't fighting. It's pride looking for attention. And pride always falls hardest." The words lingered in the silence that followed. Even those who had been amused now stood in quiet awe. No one dared to clap. The only sound was the faint dripping of water from the forgotten mop in the corner. Steady, rhythmic, almost like a clock counting the seconds of Raphael's stunned silence. For several long seconds after the fight ended, no one moved. The sound of Raphael's heavy breathing faded, replaced by the quiet rhythm of Malik's mop water dripping onto the polished floor. The students stood frozen, unsure whether they'd just witnessed humiliation or something sacred. Malik bent down, picked up the broom he'd left by the wall, and began to gather the scattered dust as if nothing unusual had happened. His movements were the same, calm, steady, deliberate, the movements of a man who carried peace even after delivering power. Raphael stood still in the center of the mat, eyes locked on Malik. The adrenaline in his body slowly drained away, leaving behind something deeper, confusion, respect, and a flicker of shame. He had entered the fight certain of his superiority, certain of his title, his years of training, his control. But what Malik had shown him wasn't violence. It was mastery, the kind that required no audience, no applause, the kind born from discipline too quiet to be noticed. He stepped off the mat, his body sore, his pride raw. "Malik," he said softly. The janitor looked up, pausing mid-sweep. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Malik's eyes were calm, almost distant, as if he were looking at something far away, something only he could see. "My father taught me," he said. "He cleaned floors for 40 years. Said every stroke of the mop teaches patience. Said every step teaches balance. He used to tell me that fighting and cleaning are the same, both about clearing what doesn't belong." Raphael stared at him, speechless. The students, once eager for laughter, now stood with quiet reverence. One of them bowed slightly, the first to understand. Another followed. Soon, the room was filled with small, silent bows. Not toward a black belt or a champion, but toward a man they had ignored. Malik shifted uncomfortably, not used to attention, and gave a faint smile. "You don't need to bow to me," he said. "Just remember that strength isn't something you wear. It's something you carry quietly. He turned back to his work, mop gliding across the floor where Raphael had fallen. Each movement erased the traces of the fight, the footprints, the scuff marks, as if restoring the dojo to peace. Raphael watched him, the weight of humility pressing into his chest. Without a word, he began to roll up his belt, his once proud hands trembling slightly. From that night forward, everything changed. Raphael started arriving early, often finding Malik already there, cleaning in silence. Sometimes he'd watch. Sometimes Malik would correct his form, just slightly, without ever claiming authority. The students, too, learned to speak to Malik differently. Not as a janitor, but as someone who embodied the very discipline they tried to learn. Months passed, and stories began to spread beyond the dojo. Whispers of the night a black belt was humbled by the man who swept the floors. Some called it a legend, others a lesson. But Malik never cared for either. Every night, when the lights dimmed and the dojo was empty, he would move across the mats with his mop like a slow, graceful dance. And in that quiet rhythm, the sweep, the turn, the soft sigh of water, lived the same precision that had once brought a champion to his knees.